Hey guys, Mr. Middleton here. Today we're going to talk about solving quadratic equations by completing the square. Sorry, trying to read and think at the same time. Doesn't work for me. Alright, at the end of this video you should be able to find the missing term that completes the perfect square trinomial, and you should be able to solve a quadratic by completing the square. So let's review a little bit. Remember, we can simplify this term, x plus 4 squared. Remember, for us that meant that we were doing x plus 4 times x plus 4. You could do the box method or the FOIL method, either way. X squared plus 4x plus 4x plus 16. Combine our like terms, and that simplified will give us x squared plus 8x plus 16. Okay. So last time we talked about solving quadratics by square roots, and remember we were not allowed to use square roots to solve x squared plus 8x plus 16 equals 0. We couldn't do that because there is a b value or b term. Okay? But today we're going to talk about completing the square, and it's going to be important for us to realize that we can rewrite some quadratics. Okay? We could rewrite x squared plus 8x plus 16. Remember, we just did that. We could write it because we know it's the same as x plus 4 squared. These two are the same. Okay, this trinomial is called a perfect square trinomial, and that's because it can be written as a perfect square, as a binomial squared. Okay, remember, binomial means two terms. So, therefore, we now have a perfect square and now we can take the square root of both sides and solve for x, just as we did last time. We were solving quadratics by taking the square root. Okay, so factoring makes this a little bit more helpful. So when we look at these, we see that we have perfect square here, x squared plus 6x plus 9, two numbers that multiply to give me 9 and add to give me 6, those numbers 3 and 3, and so I have x plus 3 and x plus 3, or x plus 3 squared. So x plus 3 squared equals 36. Now to completely solve this, I'll take the square root of both sides. Okay. Remember that we have to take both the positive root and the negative root, and then we solve both of these equations. So we have x minus 3, which is 3, and then negative 6 minus 3, which is negative 9. So here are two solutions. Okay. Next problem. Again, I'm looking at these. I can rewrite these. These are perfect squares. Two numbers that multiply to give me 25. Add to give me negative 10. Those two numbers, negative 5 and negative 5. These numbers are the same. So that means I can write this as a squared binomial. So I have x minus 5 squared equals 9. Now I can solve it by taking the square root of both sides. X minus 5 equals 3. X minus 5 equals negative 3. Okay, and now I just have to solve. Add 5 to both sides. X will equal 8. Add 5 to both sides. X equals 2. Okay, notice here, guys, when we're solving by taking the square root, we might have a lot of times plus or minus 3 or plus or minus 5 or whatever like that. Make sure here you aren't just saying, okay, that's 8, 8 and negative 8. That's not how it's working. So notice that we're having to solve both of these equations. Okay, now, that's well and good when we have a perfect square, but what happens when the trinomial is not a perfect square? We need to complete the square. Okay. think of it as make it a perfect square, but complete the perfect square. Okay, and hence the name. So here's what we do. If we're given something that's not a perfect square, as we are here, x squared plus 12x minus 13, that's not a perfect square, then what we'll do is we'll move the c value to the other side. Okay, and so now we have x squared plus 12x plus something equals 13. We basically have a blank, and I'm going to put that blank on this side as well. Okay. Alright, now what we need to do is figure out which number goes on the line to make this a perfect square trinomial. To figure this out, think about which number multiplies to itself to get, adds to itself to get 12, in this case. These values must be the same because we're making a perfect square trinomial. And then you have to multiply this number. Multiply. Okay. So, looking at this middle number, we have 12. We have to say, okay, what number plus itself gives us 12? Okay, and we can find this just by dividing by 2. Okay. So, what number plus itself gives you 12? Well, it's 6. And so then we multiply that number to find out what goes here. 6 times 6, 36. So the number that goes on this line is 36. And since I added 36 to the left side, I'll add 36 to the right side. We'll look at that even further here. Okay? So, like I said, we can't just add a random number to one side of the equal sign. To keep things balanced, you have to add it to both sides. So, 36, 36. And so now I can simplify both sides of the sign. So that gives me x plus 6 squared. See how we just made that? And on this side we have 49. Now we'll take the square root of both sides. So this will give me x plus 6. Okay, if I take the square root of both sides, this will give me plus or minus 7. And so now I have to solve these two equations. X plus 6 equals 7. X plus 6 equals negative 7. Okay, I'll subtract 6 from both sides here. X will give me 1. I'll subtract 6 from both sides here. That gives me negative 13. Okay, so basically here what we're doing with b, we get c out of the way, we divide b by 2, and multiply it by itself here. Okay, we'll do that a few more times. Okay, so here we check, is this a perfect square? So it doesn't work out for us here. Not a perfect square, so we're going to solve by completing the square. That means I'm going to move this 45 over. I have x squared plus 18x plus leaving a blank equals negative 45 plus leaving a blank. Okay, I had to move this over by subtracting 45 from both sides. Okay, so now I say, okay, what plus itself gives us 18? That's 9. So I'm using this number 9 to 9. That means this number here is going to be 81. So I have 81, 81. That helps me out because now on this left side I have a perfect square. X plus 9 squared. On the right side I have negative 45 plus 81, which is 36. Now I can solve by taking the square root of both sides. I get x plus 9 equals 6. I also have x plus 9 equals negative 6. Subtract 9 from both sides. X equals negative 3. Subtract 9 from both sides. X equals negative 15. So negative 3, negative 15. Okay, we'll do the same thing with the next problem. I'll start down here. Sorry about the overlap. So I got x squared minus 24x. I'm going to put plus some space. I'm going to add 180 to both sides so I can move that out of the way. All right, and so now I have to think, okay, two numbers that give me negative 24 would be negative 12 and negative 12. Okay, have to be the same number, remember that. So in this open spot I have 144 because that's 12 times 12. Here I have 144. And now I can start to work this problem through. Factor it, I have x, nope, not squared, minus 12 squared. On this right side I have 324. Okay, let's take the square root of both sides. So I have x minus 12 equals, what is the square root of 324? 18. Okay, so plus or minus 18, so I'll say it equals 18. X minus 12 also equals negative 18, and solve both. Add 12 to both sides, x equals 30. Add 12 to both sides, x equals negative 6. So I have 30 and negative 6. Alright, one more time. Remember, if you haven't tried this on your own yet, try it. Okay. So again, I check to see if this is a perfect square. 10 times 10, nope, doesn't work. Okay, so now I'm moving the c to the other side. I'll do that by subtracting 104. Okay, so plus space equals negative 104 plus space. Okay, and now I say, okay, the two numbers that add to give itself, or add to give us 20 would be 10 and 10. So x plus 10 squared, sorry, make this 100, because 10 times 10 is 100. This will be 100. 100 plus negative 104 would be negative 4. Okay. Now I go through, I take the square root, and hopefully when you got to this point, you say, wait, we can't take the square root of a negative sign. We can't take the square root of a negative number, because we can't. Once we get here, we should see there's no solution. We can't take the square root of a negative number. Okay, we've seen no solution. In each of the sections, it manifests itself a little bit differently. In the graphing section, remember that means we had no x-intercepts. With the square root section, it's just like this. When we had to take the square root of a negative number, we couldn't do it. Okay, can't do it. No solution. Alright? Alright, here are some tips to be successful with this method. Take your time to get the correct number that completes the square. Without this number correct, you can't do the problems correctly. Okay? Don't forget to include plus and minus when you take the square root of both sides. Then keep your signs with the appropriate number. Okay, so make sure that you keep your negative 7 negative. You just have to be organized, okay? Okay, this is a process that you'll do a bunch of times, but it gets easier as you do it, okay? All right, that is solving a quadratic using pleating the square. We'll get some practice with it, and by the end of the day, you'll love this method. See ya.